My name's Bart Womack. My entire adult life has been spent trying to answer the question, how did you make a more free world? And I asked that question, of course, because I wanted to live free. I wanted my children to live free. For a long time, I thought that it was in educating the public. Later, I believed it was through art. But now I've come to a very different conclusion. If you want to live in a free world, you have to build it. You have to make it happen. When the pilgrims left the old world and came to the new world, they were coming somewhere to live a life that they couldn't lead in the world that they had been a part of. And this is fundamentally the truth of where I think we're going now. The digital world, the technocracy, the technosphere, whatever you want to call it, fundamentally destroys human freedom. It destroys human anonymity. It destroys human community. It takes away everything and gives us nothing. If we want to have a free future, we cannot live inside this system. We cannot be a part of the technosphere and truly be human beings. We cannot allow our technology to be utilized to give us everything and take everything away. And what do I mean by that? The technosphere and the technocracy speak exactly to human laziness. Sure, you can get on right now and you can order 1,000,000 things you don't need. But you yourself don't produce any of the things you do need. And so that means you're a slave. You're a slave. We're all slaves to this system. A system designed to give us everything we want, but to take away everything we really have. Our dignity, our individuality, our privacy, our connection to nature, our connection to each other. What does it matter if we can get anything we want, but we don't have anything that we need? We are all dying on the inside, slowly. Humanity is slowly being anesthetized by its own desire and appetite for garbage. And until we can look this thing in the face and see it for what it is, there can't be a positive future. Every generation is degenerating. Life expectancy is going down. Human connectivity is going down. Human empathy is going down. Human fulfillment is going down. This is happening because we're not connected to one another. We're not connected to nature. We're not connected to our own power. And power begins with the ability of taking care of yourself. Power begins in a community or a family or an individual with the ability to sustain themselves without any outside help. And the systems that we've created completely rob us of that. it completely takes away our individual experience and makes us completely exposed to needing the help of this outside system and this outside force that most people would die without. So that's what makes so many on earth today slaves. Because they don't control their own destiny. Because they don't control where their food comes, they don't control where their water comes from, they don't control where their energy comes from. All of those things can be taken away from people. And then on top of that, we exist in a system that's 100% designed to track, monitor, and now being perfected to manipulate our minds and opinions. What a lot of people don't understand about the way media works, the internet is the evolution of the television. It's the interactive television that allows for the programming that comes through it to be completely individualized for the individual. So now, where the systems of propaganda and programming had to be made as palatable for the masses and as effective for manipulating as many people as possible, now with the power of the algorithm, with the power of the internet, we're able to create propaganda, manipulation, and control that is 100% designed for smaller and smaller vectors and groupings of people. With the end result obviously being that eventually the individual will be completely buried under propaganda that's been 100% designed for them alone. And at that point, how would we even be able to know what's real anymore? How would we even be able to know what are our own thoughts and what are the thoughts that have been placed there by the outside? I've always wanted to be hopeful for the future, and I am still hopeful for the future. But as I see it, the rest of our lives, the rest of this period, will be coming to terms with these questions. Will we live in a world where we're absolutely controlled, or will we live in a world where we're free? Will you give up your birthright as a lord and lady of the earth itself to be a peon digital slave simply because you want to be able to order things off Amazon? I look around and I just see endless appetite, endless expanses of people trying to satisfy something that can never be satisfied from the outside, and a system designed to lull them into a state of hypnotic victimization. Where there's armies of people willingly marching towards their own servitude, believing that the expansion of these systems through government will set them free, or not even questioning any aspect of their world or reality and being completely self-absorbed into the entertainment paradigm that's been displayed for them. I remember going to college and having friends that started playing video games, and it's now been 20 years, and they just never stopped. These are people that went to college with the idea that they were going to do something with their lives, and left college and have now been working at waiting jobs or delivering pizzas for 20 years because they don't care about living in an apartment and having just enough money to pay their bills, get the next best video game, work 8 hours, come home and play video games for another 8 or 10 hours, and then sleep 4 or 5 hours, and then repeat. And that's been their life. What kind of effect has that had on our world? That there's entire lost generations of people now getting older and older that capitulated their entire life because a two-dimensional video game was more interesting than the real world. I remember when I was in college and I had a friend that I was over at his house, and his house was a mess, and he's playing this video game called The Sims. And in the video game, he's made a duplicate of his house, down to the cats, the furniture, himself, and he's playing the game, and he's cleaning up the litter box, the digital litter box, and telling me if I don't clean up the litter box, my sim gets unhappy. And I remember just looking at him and turning and looking at the litter box in the corner, and then looking at him and looking at the litter box in the corner. And I had played that game a few times, but I walked out of his apartment that day and I never played that game again. And within a year or two, I wasn't even playing video games anymore. Because I started to understand that every moment of my life that I was investing into the game, I wasn't playing in the most magnificent game that had ever been designed. Real life. And I question now, and I think about it, that's a two-dimensional game on a screen. What happens when the games become more real than reality? What happens when, through the implementation of biological interface with the video games, or the perfection of the game, one of the reasons these games are so addictive these days is because they've been literally designed by teams of psychiatrists and psychologists down to the second of when the game needs to give you a dopamine rush to keep you hooked into playing the game. It's literally digital drugs. Digital drugs designed to pull you in and make you as addicted as possible to playing the game. What happens when, and the technology for this has been developed, brain implants, chip implants, designed to stimulate the dopamine in your brain, and serotonin releases in your brain. What happens one day when there are video games that are more realistic or as realistic as real life that can also biochemically manipulate you? I've watched people give up their entire lives for a two-dimensional character in World of Warcraft. What happens when it's a three-dimensional character that's more real and feels more real than their real life because they've become so absolutely disassociated from real life because of their interface with the digital sphere. How many millions of people, if they had the choice that they could give up the modality of their working real lives to instead embrace the adventure of a fake digital one? Mm-hmm. And the truth is real life is suffering. Real life is pain. Real life requires sacrifice to achieve things. And if people are given the opportunity to insert themselves into a false reality that they perceive as easier and gives them an easier out and benefit, how many would choose that? How many of you would choose that? And the fact is I fundamentally believe that there's huge parts of the population that would willingly go into that system and give up their real life to live inside of a more fun and easier digital life. So along the horizon, I see these are the futures that are presenting themselves to us. Futures where we completely give all of our autonomy over to the digital world, which we've already begun to do. You know, it really amazes me. Elon Musk comes out and says within 2 years he'll be doing implantable microchips at all of the Tesla storefronts. Why would anyone ever trust any group, corporation, or government in this world with their mental autonomy? All of history, all of our lives have been nothing but the repeated lesson of showing us again and again and again that every freedom we've ever given up has been abused. And it didn't matter what kind of safeguards, what kind of guarantees we were given by whoever. It always has resulted in the same end. Good example. After 9/11, the Patriot Act was passed, and we were told that American citizens would never be used against American citizens. It's continually used against American citizens. 20 years ago, the idea that we were being spied or watched by the government or major corporations was considered absurd. Now it's 100% accepted. So you want to let these same people into your mind, into your soul? You trust them with that when we haven't been able to trust them with anything? These are the questions we're asking. To me, these are the only questions worth asking.